Hey everybody, it's your pal Drew Dracy, longtime comic book industry veteran for DC, Marvel, IDW, Cross-Gen, Dark Horse, etc., etc. And I still have fanboy blood, ink in my veins since I was 7 years old, and I'm a little bit older than 7, at least physically, and I'm still a fanboy. I'll die a fanboy, and hopefully not too soon. So, enough about me. Let's talk about me. So, Doctor Strange, I was thumbing through on my shelves. I saw this, and I was like, oh man, I remember I could not wait till the Marvel Masterworks caught up to this era. I had a previous episode where I covered Steve Ditko's run on Doctor Strange, and the funny thing is, in the first appearance of Doctor Strange, which was in Strange Tales, they shared with the Human Torch. It was done by Steve Ditko and scripted by Stan. But here's the thing: years later, in Origins of Marvel Comics, there was a Stan did one of his fun little bullshit, forewords, and he says he was inspired by Chandu the magician, and he went on about it. But the fact of the matter is, he misremembered it or whatever, because when this issue came out, when Doctor Strange's first book came out, in the letters page, or the bullpen bulletin page, it said, we have this all new strip for you, we hope you like it. 'Twas all Steve's idea. So I'm like, bam. So, but you know what, Stan, Jack Kirby, and others have poor memories, but Steve Ditko does not, which is frustrating because Steve Ditko didn't do interviews. He did one back in, his last one was in 1966 or something like that. And it just would have been nice to hear what he has to say. I was waiting forever and a day for this Marvel Masterworks to come out, because this is when I started picking up Doctor Strange. I didn't like Doctor Strange because it was pretty average by the time I got there. You had a variety of writers, and then Gene Colan, who I felt was kind of going through the motions, because when he did Doctor Strange in the 70s, anytime a spell was cast, it was just a bunch of swirls, that you can doodle real fast. So, with the light source and everything was cool, but there was no feeling that there was an actual spell being made. And maybe he was trying to do it, maybe he was using his sense of realism to sort of tone down the mystic visual tone to be palatable to mortals. I wasn't keen on it. And here's the thing. After Steve Ditko left, as he left Spider-Man, and Murray Severn took over for a while, then Bill Everett took over, and Dan Adkins, and none of them had the flair. They just seemed wrong for the projects. They're excellent craftsmen. It's just, how do you fill Steve Ditko's shoes? I mean, you need, especially immediately. That was the hard part, too. And it was also 10 pages each issue, or was it 12? I can't remember. So somehow, when their competitor, National Periodicals, which became DC Comics, they actually distributed Marvel when Marvel was at their lowest in like the late 50s. And all of a sudden the contract was over. Marvel can expand their universe titles. And all of a sudden, Doctor Strange went from a split book, as did Nick Fury, to they both had books. And same thing with Iron Man, Captain America, Tales of Suspense, Tales to Astonish with the Hulk and Submariner. And then there was other new books like Silver Surfer, and just a general, a lot of experimentation was going on. But the problem is that the talent pool was kind of thinning out, and there was some wonky stuff going on there, but and some odd fits, as I had said before, with Marie and Bill and all that. So Doctor Strange had started with issue 169. It continued the numbering from Strange Tales, whereas Nick Fury started with issue 1. And a lot of stuff like Journey into Mystery, Journey into Mystery had just changed the name to Thor and kept the numbering. And the reason I have heard is that is that a lot of people on the newsstands, if they saw a number one, they felt it was untried, and they felt it was a risk, or not a risk. They just weren't. They didn't have much hope for it. They didn't think it was going to sell well. But if it had 169, I mean, that book's been around a long time, and it's, we're fanboys today. Just about every adult has some knowledge of comics that the previous generation didn't. So bear in mind, when people would put these comics on the stands, they didn't really pay attention to the details. Like that, say that was the latest book that came out, and then this was supposed to replace it. You just switched it over and everything. You didn't. When you got new comics in, you kicked the old ones out. But if you saw, you might be more interested in buying an issue 1. No. Excuse me. An issue 169 than a 1, because a 1 was untested. So it's like my wife, she is not at all into comic books. She is not at all. She loves geology, gems and all that kind of stuff, geography, and she knows history, everything I don't know. But it's like none of these awesome images mean anything to her, but that's not a sin. It's just, I'm deep into comics lore since way back when. She, like a lot of people that are our age, early, late middle ages, a lot of them outgrew comics. Like a lot of them, they discover girls, or vice versa, and they gave up comic books. I knew so many people that gave up comic books, and I got free comics as a benefit. Now, Roy Thomas, Gene Colan took over Doctor Strange with issue 169, but it only lasted till like 182 because Marvel was coming out with all these new titles. It was spreading the talent thin. It was also spreading out. You had fans that we want to get more stuff, but it's all split now, and I don't know. It's like, Jim Steranko didn't do issue 4 of Nick Fury, and he left after 5, and just stuff like that. So I bumped the camera. What am I getting to? Oh, well, I had an episode that covered that. I had an episode that covered the return of Doctor Strange, but that was kind of brief. You had first Barry Windsor Smith when he was still working out the details. His faces were kind of funky and such, but I also covered the Frank Brunner, Steve Englehart era, which was a true masterpiece, like a real worthy successor to the greats that had come before him. He just was a quantum leap. He sort of had a Neil Adams feel, but then he took it to a more fantastical style. And Steve Englehart came on board, and they did a great era, which I had covered also. Now, after they left, Brunner, he went on to do Howard the Duck briefly, after they told these 2 or 3 tales they wanted to get out of their system, stories they had to have. Steve Englehart stayed on the book, and then Gene Colan took over. And the problem with Gene Colan was he drew Doctor Strange's spells like swirly and all that stuff. He didn't really. I thought there was an ant there. It's on my camera. Excuse me. Pain in the ass. So I didn't buy it for a long time because, especially after Steve Englehart left, it was kind of rudderless. And the art would change a lot, but Colan would do a lot of the issues, but you could see he was just kind of banging it out because it just really wasn't, Roy Thomas wasn't writing it, so it wasn't giving Colan the right visuals. Like Roy with Neil Adams was exceptional, but the writers that came and went throughout the 70s, it just looked dull. And then issue 48, which I saw thanks to my cousin. Let's go to this first. Okay. I mean, this is very... Hey, get out of here. No, that was an ant on there. We've been besieged by ants the past week or so. Gene Colan, and it's good. I mean, I love Gene Colan, but it's just so... See what I mean? It's like that, and this seems like a 3-page a day type comic. It's like nothing is fully complete. There are a few establishing shots, and it just bored me to tears, and I skipped it for so long. There were some good fill-ins by Tom Sutton, but as I had said before in another episode, you have to watch them all. Tom Sutton I loved, but he wasn't the Marvel style, and it wasn't until I got older that I really loved his style. So, so we were over at my parents' house, and my cousin Sean was over for a few days, and we were the only two geeks we knew. We were just parted by several miles, about, I'm trying to think where, I don't know, about a half hour away at least. So he showed me this. I'm like, look at all this going on. Wow. And these are color holds. That means these are done in ink, but they're done separate acetate layers. So you take out the blue here and you lay this on here. Then you put yellow and then the magenta separately. And it was the first radical art change since in many years. This is straight off of Batman. Now, when Marshall Rogers and Steve Englehart did Batman, they really got that out of the doldrums as well. So they went over to Doctor Strange and decided to revive that as well. So that whole image there is a color hold. And I wasn't buying I wasn't buying Doctor Strange, but I read this issue, and it was pretty impressive. I'm like, look at all this going on. It's like, it wasn't just swirly stuff. And it's like Marshall Rogers, Terry Austin, they took advantage of the book not looking like every other superhero book. They really, and it doesn't, I mean, even though it's the same quality, it's not, the language you're using is not even the same as they used for Batman. It's a whole different visual approach. And, oh man, when this came out in Marvel Masterworks, I nearly flipped my lid, as they used to say. Because it was on regular paper, and I'm not a paper snob, as I've said a billion times, but this stuff warrants good paper. How about that? So, I didn't have that issue, but I did start picking up with this, because that is just extremely badass. That, these poses, so much going on. And Roger Stern is writing it. When Roger Stern came on board, too, he humanized Doctor Strange. That was the other problem, is after Englehart left, nobody knew how to give him a personality. He was just, I don't know, he was just a straight man who, you know, had events evolve around him instead of being proactive and having interactions with people who had worked with him. Baron Mordo. Now, Baron Mordo, I mean, since Ditko, even more so with these lines, I've never seen a more badass image of Baron Mordo. And that's a prelude. Terry Austin inspired Art Adams to do that kind of effect. It all started with Terry Austin, one of the greatest inkers of all time. And this is friggin' amazing. Friggin' amazing. They come out that, they go up here, come out, Mordo pushes them down, and that is just insane. And only Doctor Strange is where you would see this kind of effect. It's just not common. You know, you can't do that with Thor or Batman or Captain America. I mean, you can do it for like a dream sequence, but it wouldn't last much longer than, let's see, bane of my existence. So, Roger Stern really gave a good voice to Doctor Strange. That is just, I can't imagine how long that took. I mean, if you did it on a computer, it would take you it would take you half a day or a day. So, there we go. That cemented my interest. That's just incredible. And he also went back with the long mustache that he had when he first appeared. Let me see. Yeah, so much going on. It's just beautiful. And, by the way, this book was bi-monthly. I meant to start off with that, But I would argue that if a lot of books were bi-monthly, I think you would get more consistent quality of story and art. I've noticed on some trade paperbacks you'll have a variety of artists, and they may be radically different. Like, I think, what's his name? Dan Acuna or Dave Acuna. He does like a painted style, and he did like one chapter of an Avengers story, and it just seemed really out of place with the rest of the art in the trade paperback. So you go to Michael friggin' Golden and Terry Austin. Every professional artist that I know, everyone has a copy of this by their drawing table. This is just like, and it's because some of these artists, I think, would thrive. What's wrong with my camera? Some of these artists I think a lot of series would, like Doctor Strange, would benefit by being bi-monthly, because then you get the cream of the crop who can't do a monthly book. And we'll start off with Doctor Strange. How about that? Paul Smith comes on board, some new kid on the block. Here comes Doctor Strange right away. It's impressive. And Terry Austin's still on board. He stays on for a while. Give me a second. And he does an interview. And he's very normal. He tells his story. He goes through the disguises, and there are 3 old foes of his during the Ditko era. And he does an MC Escher on them. Big time. That's just stunning stuff. Look at that. Jeez, oh Pete. Then we get a fill-in issue, quote unquote, by Kevin Nolan, Terry Austin inking. And this is Kevin Nolan. He had done single strips, illustrations for the Comics Journal, and then he comes to Doctor Strange fully formed. He had done a book called Grimwood's Daughter that he penciled, inked, and lettered. He can letter amazingly. So this is just brilliant stuff here. Here's Doctor Doom. Basically, it comes out that Doctor Strange is looking for a new disciple, since Clea left him. But Roger Stern, it's all under the same stewardship as Roger Stern. So a lot of books like Captain America, Iron Man. Oh no, actually, for a while Iron Man was 8 months a year, but Captain America, Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, anyway, they would stay monthly. But you would find in the early 70s that there were books that were, I gotta stop that stupid tick I make like that. I sound like a chipmunk. But this was bi-monthly for the longest time, and other books were 8 times a year. And I think it's just a publishing thing. They were like, well, we can almost do a monthly, but we can't. Now this is a Charles Vess piece, and Charles Vess is this amazing illustrator. And this actually came from Marvel Fanfare. This was an extra story that is in this volume here. Astral Playing Cards. It's wacky. A lot of wacky stuff, but extra stuff. So, I mean, I feel some books could go bi-monthly and keep the cream of the crop. I mean, there's not a stinker in this whole Roger Stern run. It goes from great to great to great. Now, this is cool, because Dan Green, I don't know a lot of his penciling. We lost him recently, and he was a fantastic inker, and he illustrated quite a few issues here. There's Terry Austin inking, another consistency. And he's visiting not the ancient one, but I can't remember his name. But they keep that mustache going. They keep that kick-ass mustache going. How about that? This is one of my favorite panels of all time of Doctor Strange that Dan Green came up with. And it totally surprised me. I was like, who knew Dan Green would be... Who knew that he could contribute even something more to Doctor Strange? That's an interesting thing. I mean, aside the fact that he's an excellent storyteller here, and he's doing some really unique imagery, it was out of a bolt from the blue. So much going on. There's so much to show. I'm trying to avoid this from being an hour, but I don't think I can. So I hope you like the eye candy, and you don't have to rely on just listening. Who would listen to my droning ass voice? So beautiful cover there by Frank Chiraco, who did Alien Legion, and I'm probably getting his name wrong. He was another guy from Neil Adams Continuity Studios, and exceptional. And I don't think he did comics for very long. So all of this architecture and Zipatone on top of that. Well, this is the best comics. My concern, though, is would people who... There we go. Steve Lee Aloha. How about that? That would be great just as a Photoshop painted image. But no, it was all done with regular paints back in the day. And Steve Lee Aloha is doing the interior work as well. He did Coyote for a couple issues. He co-created that with Steve Englehart, and he's inked a lot of stuff. But this is where I really saw him actually draw stuff, aside from penciling. There was a point I was going to make. Oh, I don't know if current readers, younger readers, new readers of any age would have the patience to wait 2 months for a book. But I kept buying this book. I thought I was going to quit after Marshall Rogers, but then, it was a Michael Golden issue, and then it was a Brent Anderson issue, which was pretty good, but it wasn't. He's a lot better on Earthbound comics, I guess you might say. Well, he did great on X-Men too, but all these people are just throwing something into it that's just unique. I get ready with a showdown with Dracula. Now we go to Carl Potts, who did this cover, and how about that? It doesn't even look like he put white Zipatone on the circles there, but Carl Potts he's mostly an editor, and he created the Alien Legion that Frank Chiraco drew and designed them as well. But he is an artist in his own right, but he does mostly editing, and he's still on board. He's still doing other stuff for Marvel. He's one of those few people who's had like a long career. Him and Ralph Macchio, not the Karate Kid. I know everyone says that, but it's kind of a mystery. It's like, how did some of these guys stay at Marvel without being given the boot by shallow people who come in and take over a comics company? Now we got Tony Salmon's new kid on the block, relatively on the art. Innocenti's filling in on a story. That's a rarity because Roger Stern, he still has an ongoing story, and Tony Salmon stuff, it's just so different. I keep saying that, but it is. And that's what I'm loving is you're getting all kinds of influence. You're not having him just point and a bunch of swirly stuff come around. You're seeing some imagery. The storytelling is very inspired. All these artists I'm mentioning, they're just bringing something. It's like Doctor Strange permits them to experiment on crazy ass storytelling. And Paul Smith was back. Charlatan. Oh, this came back too when Marshall Rogers came along. The little Kirby type dots that Ditko originally gave the sleeves on Doctor Strange. Wow. I'm wondering if Paul Smith is on board. New kid on the block, but he's getting better and better with each issue. He's inking himself on this. So, and you know what? This seems like a lot of yada yada, but Roger Stern with this and with Spider-Man, there was not a word wasted. It was very, very, it served the story. And Paul Smith has totally changed from his stuff. I can't remember if he did X-Men first. I think he did. He did X-Men very briefly, but he had such an impact. So we're seeing this. I can't deny this. Cover. How daring is that? Man, the coloring and the white spaces on the leaves on the would-be assassin, and even the pose. It's not typical, and none of these guys are. And there's Roger Stern again. I mean, he's been doing it. The only issue he didn't do was one Ann Nocenti filled in, and he just does he does the opposite of what a lot of artists were doing in the past, where they over render the face. He keeps them relatively simple, and he does different nuances. Beautiful, beautiful. I'm jumping ahead to more Steve Lealoha stuff. There's Clea. She left to go to the Dark Dimension to help overthrow her oops, I did it again. Her aunt Yuna, and I think she's Dormammu's son or something like that, or her. I don't know. Maybe Umo's her mom. I'd have to look this over again. But it's just stunning. Now back with Paul Smith. Now this is a bi-monthly book, so we may not have had this issue come out. He might have gotten fired for not being able to do a monthly book, because that's just how some things work out in funny books. But I mean, Doctor Strange went from my complete ignorance and complete disinterest to the book I look for the most. When I got that, I'd get them every other month, and that was the first thing I read. And Doctor Strange had a personality finally. I mean, he wasn't doing jokey stuff like in the Marvel movies. He was just relatable. And Dane Whitman's having nightmares about his time during the Crusades, which was horrible and bloody. Jumping ahead, there's Brett Blevin, who would be an artist later on the book, and inked by Mondello, who is actually Kevin Nolan having a joke. I guess he was going for Larry Mondello, and I don't even know why. He didn't have to worry about it. He was just having fun. Here you go. Roger Stern, Paul Smith. That's really stunning. That's a tough angle there. And Paul Smith just keeps reinventing himself with each issue. There's Umar. I like that. Maybe an overlong face, but that is to add to the drama. That's almost like a Kirby foreshortening there. And it's not something he hangs his hat on. He just plays around. And Brett Blevins is doing a fill-in, and it's another home run. It's spectacular. So I'm still digging this book. And we go back to another Paul Smith book. And check this out. Check out the figure work here and here. Very Ditko. Very, very Ditko. And check this UPC barcode out. I'm trying to think if I'll have to look. I don't know if I have a floppy of it, but I wonder if it went out like that. Probably not, but who knows? Who knows? It might have been direct sales only as a gag because they didn't use barcodes. So flashback that doesn't feel like a flashback because there's so much eye candy. Dark Dimension. Yeah, see? I mean, Ditko created this. He created this amazing... I can't think of how to put it. Just an amazingly different character for a Marvel character. Like, he's not over the top, as most Marvel characters are, who were created by Kirby and other characters. Whereas Kirby was more blunt. Steve Ditko and his, I would say his followers here during the 80s, they were more into the subtle and nuanced. That's a great cover there. I think that's also, that's a, come on. Focus. I can't even make out what it says. It's like M something. M. Night Shyamalan. Okay. Paul Smith is back. And this is such a unique way to draw hair at the time. Paul Smith did this originally on Kitty Pryde in the X-Men. And I just love it. I love it if it was in focus more, but okay, there. It kind of reminds me of that, what's that candy that little old ladies used to have? Ribbon candy in a bowl. It all stuck together. There was an old issue of Simpsons where Bart grabs one and they all come out. So, but he's fearless, you know? Paul's fearless. And it goes on and on. Here's another Brett Blevins cover with Austin. The simplicity and the storytelling, it takes a lot of talent to balance this kind of splash and do this. So much deliciousness. Here's an ad for, which I'm going to show you shortly, Dan Green doing a graphic novel, which it is going to be reprinted finally in an upcoming Marvel Masterworks, I think. It's either that or a Epic Collection. I can't remember which. But it's wonderful. Listen to me. That's not going to jag off. So Dan Green paints this whole issue, this whole graphic novel written by J.M. DeMatteis, who grew up reading a lot about Eastern culture. And he kind of ties it into Doctor Strange's origin, because he goes to the Orient when he's desperate and wants to repair his hands so he can go back to being a greedy doctor. Man, if I were to show this to you and not tell you who it is, you would never have guessed it was Dan Green, because I don't think he had a lot of opportunities to paint stuff like that. So he had already established himself as a great, artist on the regular book. Boy, this is such a good read. I'm going to read it over again. And again, it's like in the 80s, you had Paul Smith, Michael Golden, Marshall Rogers, Kevin Nolan, Brett Blevins, Carl Potts. It's like they were competing to see who can do the best Doctor Strange. And, Dan Green. It's like they all saw the potential in Doctor Strange for great artwork. Like artwork beyond the usual, slobber knocker fights. Wow. Oh, crap. Those are the only words in the whole graphic novel that Strange says. So I really recommend this. This is like dirt cheap to buy. You could probably buy it for cover price at your local comic shop, at your better local comic shops that keep those kind of things. So beautiful. There's J.M. DeMatteis, and there's Dan Green. Now, even more so, this Marvel Fanfare trade came out, reprinted the first 6-7 issues. It's now there's an omnibus with like the first 30 or 40 issues in it, and I don't think I'm going to double dip. I buy too many. I filled in the issues I wanted, but with issue 5 we get the return of Marshall Rogers. And this one's written by Chris Claremont, and P. Craig Russell, aka Craig Russell, inks Marshall Rogers. How about that? That nightgown. So I would say the 80s are like, I guess the apex, is that the right term maybe for this? It's just the highest, it's just the decade of the best Doctor Strange artwork. Okay? That's my opinion, and I'm sticking with it. Now I'm jumping down to here. Somehow the stairs really inspired people, and that's good. This is by Charles friggin' Vess, written by Roger Stern, the usual writer, and it became a Marvel Fanfare special. So this guy wants to prove that he's better sorcerer than Doctor Strange, and Charles Vess's stuff is just so wonderful. It's that is a beautiful face. He also did a couple issues of Marvel Fanfare that had the Warriors 3, and then he also did a Marvel graphic novel called The Raven Banner, which had to do with Asgard, but had really nothing to do with Thor. It's really magnificent. So there's that. And wait, there's more. As most of you probably know, there was another graphic novel with Mike Mignola and Mark Badger, written by Roger Stern. Yet again, he was the glue that kept it together, and I think he was stronger. Chris Claremont is an awesome writer, but I thought his Doctor Strange was kind of dry, and there was some other. Jim Starlin played around with Doctor Strange as well, but for so long it was accepted that Strange was just a stodgy defender of our reality and universe, and he didn't have a sense of humor and all that. But he doesn't go full Star-Lord or anything, but he does. He talks and acts and does things that other humans do that between the panels. So this has been reprinted a billion times, but it's still great. I actually have the graphic novel. I only use this because it's smaller. And you know what? I like this style of Mignola a lot better than his Hellboy stuff. That's very, very blasphemous. But I love what Mark Badger adds to this. And similarly in DC's, what was it called? Cosmic Odyssey, where he was inked by Carlos Garzon, who inked Al Williamson on the Star Wars movie adaptations. I just like the more linear style. Like that. It's like he's not reduced to like black. There's a lot of nuance going on there. And Mark Badger's one of those guys too who's just really, I hate to say it, he's ignored. He's a great artist, but you just don't see his work. I know he's had some health issues, but a while back, but I'd love to see his work again. I'm sure he could still kick ass, but this ain't. Things have changed, But wow, like that kind of stuff. That's very Mark Badger. So it goes on and on, and then Mike Mignola would make it huge with Gotham by Gaslight, the first Elseworlds, and this is great too. Kevin Nolan does the covers for the revived Doctor Strange, starting with issue 1, written by Roy Thomas, and first done by Richard Case, and then later on Jackson Geiss. That's when the book really got moving. Yeah, he had an eye patch for a while. It's a long story. That is Craig. Listen to me. This is Craig Hamilton, a close personal friend of mine. That is just breathtaking. You can tell he's studied P. Craig Russell as well. So here we go with the beginning of the new era. So I also, there was a P. Craig Russell. I have another episode. I'll add a link in the description of P. Craig Russell doing a one-shot called What Is It That Disturbs You, Stefan, which he did for a Doctor Strange annual in 1977 and then redid it in 1997 and made it spectacular. So that's it. I think the 80s are the apex. Like, this was still 1988. I think the 80s were the apex of artistry for Doctor Strange. There was just so much glorious art going on. And I don't, after a while, I guess in the 90s, it started to get a little too, whoever could draw would draw. And it's no disrespect to the people who, I've been one of those guys who can just ink on certain projects, and in some I do better on. Hey, you little bastard, ink you ink ant. But anyway, that's all. The 80s to me were the apex. We're going to ignore, aside from Ditko, who was the man who established everything, the 80s, and accepting Frank Bruner and Gene Colan, early Gene Colan's work, spectacular work. The 80s were the apex of Doctor Strange art, in my opinion. So let me know what you think. Let me know if I turn you on to some of these titles. Let me think if you disagree. I don't delete any comment. In fact, I had one guy, I don't know, like 6 months ago said, I'm leaving your page because I didn't like this, and I'm unsubscribing. And I'm like, I didn't argue with him. I just said I'm sorry, and I hope you come back sometime. Because I don't, we're all here to have fun. It's all about comics, and comics are fun, and they kick ass. So, that's about it. I will catch you all later.